Hey, y'all.
Oh, you're looking at me to start?
Yeah, you usually do. It's like tradition.
Okay. Well, I guess everybody knows we got knocked off the ballot in Wisconsin, and we should have been on by the facts and the law, as the dissenting opinion in the Wisconsin Supreme Court decision made clear. And we've been treated as pawns by the partisan hacks in both of these parties. The Democrats knew we were qualified, but they didn't let us present our evidence in the hearing on a challenge to us. So we had to go to court. And then the Republicans on the Supreme Court, 4-3 majority, took their damn sweet time. And meanwhile, we're getting blamed for holding up the election. But both these parties do it. That's why we need a new party. So we got screwed. And of course, we're getting vilified by the corporate state media for the two-party corporate state. Rachel Maddow had a doozy last night saying we were a Republican op. He's a Democratic op. If anybody's an op of somebody else.
Bless him.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I'm glad
So, we're fighting for our life here for the Green Party. They're trying to knock us off the ballot, whether it's by denying us ballot access when we're qualified. We're in court. Where are we in court? We're in court in Pennsylvania. We were in Wisconsin. Texas, we just won there.
We just won, yes.
Our down ballot candidates are back on the ballot. Nevada, Arizona, their case is pending, won't be resolved this year. Montana. And of course, the Democrat strategy is to divert our attention and bleed us dry financially. But we're not going to roll over. But ballot status is on the line here. Whether here in New York, they passed a law that tripled the number of votes we need to keep our ballot line and doubled the frequency. Used to be every 4 years for the governor race. Now it's governor and presidential races. So we got to get like 160, 170,000 votes, 2%. The only Green candidates to ever do that were Ralph Nader in 2000 and me in 2014 running for governor. So we're fighting for our life here. We're fighting for our life everywhere because the Democrats would rather just, eliminate us as competition. So, but we're not going away. Whatever happens, we're going to keep fighting. And the other thing that came out is a bunch of aging environmentalists like me came out with a letter, people that a lot of them were around the first Earth Day and so forth. And most of their affiliations on the letter were with environmental lobbies. And I have a response that hopefully will be published tomorrow, but it's just about done and I'll be sending it out. And, my point is the role of social movements is to make demands on every candidate, me included. Instead, they're saying we're settling for Biden, who has a terrible environmental record and platform, especially on climate change, which is the key issue now. He's pro-fossil fuels. He makes that okay by saying, I'm going to put in carbon capture and sequestration. They ain't happening. They only got one plant that does that, and it's inexpensive, uneconomical. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be with federal subsidies. In other words, you're going to pay for it with your tax dollars, or otherwise gas will be priced out of the market. So, his plan is the old Democratic Obama-Biden plan, all of the above. Frack the hell out of the country for gas and oil. Obama now brags that he made us the number one oil and gas producer in the world. To hell with the climate. And they're pro-nuclear. The Democratic platform for the first time in 50 years is pro-nuclear. Nuclear power costs 2 or 3 times more than solar and wind power, most applications of solar and wind. So why would you waste money, get less power for the same dollar on a dangerous, dirty, uneconomical industry? Unless you're beholden to donors in the military-industrial complex, which is what these nuclear vendors are. So we have plenty of issues here, and I hope people aren't discouraged but ready to fight back. So that's what I got to say tonight. What do you got to say, Angela?
Well, I sent a love letter, did a live just before we started. I was telling Howie and Andrea, folks who follow me on my Facebook campaign page and also my personal page, a love letter to my folks in the Wisconsin Greens, and also folks who circulated the petitions. There's a whole plague going on. And so I just want people to remember, y'all are brave. We did not get the outcome that we wanted in Wisconsin or the outcome that we deserved. And, you know, 3 of the justices, the dissenting justices, their dissents are very powerful. And I shared a little piece of that on that live. But what I want people to know is these attempts at pushing us off the ballot are intended to belittle us. They're intended to intimidate us, because these folks really thought that we were going to tuck our little tails and go, oh, well, you know, no, we fought them all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. We told them, ain't nobody playing this mess with you. I literally moved 4 miles. Every piece of documentation we were asked for, we provided. I'm in the same city, same state, 4 miles. And they use that as the flimsiest pretext ever to attack us in my home state. And so for me, this one was personal. And I just want our folks, not only in Wisconsin, to remember we're not wrong. We're not wrong to want 3rd and 4th and 5th choices. We're not wrong to support ranked choice voting. We are the only party that is talking about and has policies around the things that we have policies around. When we're talking about immediate measures for climate, reversing climate change, immediate measures to get people through this pandemic, immediate measures to provide an economic bill of rights for people so we're not losing people through the cracks. That's us. That's nobody else. And we're going to stand on that. And so what we needed them to understand is we will fight you. This didn't give us the outcome that we were hoping for. Okay, fine. What people do understand now is that the Democrats have unmasked themselves, and that in Wisconsin, these folks are toothless when they're fighting against the Republicans. But they nut up. You know, you're real brave when it comes to us, which makes you a bully. And we're calling you out. We saw you. Everybody sees it. You just told thousands of people in Wisconsin they have no right to choice. And when in 2016, correct me if I'm wrong, Howie, it was 88,000 Wisconsinites who could vote that did not? You just told a whole bunch of people to stay home. Excellent strategy. We are not going anywhere. And for people who are vote shaming and all of this other stuff, stand on why you're here. You know why you're standing with us. You know what you want. Tell them to get bent. Hey, John Ralston, don't get mad, get organized, donate money, volunteer, spread the word. I can't say it no better than that. Mr. President.
Amen. Moron for the world.
It disappeared.
The question disappeared.
It disappeared. Yes, Brent, and I'm looking in the chat. Brenda Brown, can people in Wisconsin write you in? We are working on that as we speak. We are working to get the affidavits and things like that in. We're making sure that this time they're not going to pull some crap with them. So we'll be keeping y'all abreast of the situation as we go, but that is our next strategy, yes. So y'all just hold on.
Yeah, we'll be on. I mean, write-ins will count in Wisconsin for sure. Jeremy W., what are your thoughts on Joe Rogan debate that Trump said he's interested in, as your campaign reached out to Joe Rogan's show to join the debate? I believe we have, or somebody tweeted that,
yep.
Hey, if Biden won't show up, I will. And I'm ready. And Trump won't know it hit him.
Yes, it's on Howie's Twitter feed. It's on my Twitter feed. We keep adding it. So if y'all catch it and you see it, go ahead and hit that retweet so you know they can quit acting like they don't hear us. DCT Tech 00. Hey, sugar. Am I able to write you guys in Colorado if you get pushed off the ballot? We're not getting pushed off the ballot in Colorado. Our campaign manager and them got that on lock. We are on the ballot in Colorado, fair and square. You know, certain states we didn't have these battles. And Colorado was one of them. California is one of them. Florida, we didn't have to go through all of this. Here in South Carolina, where I am, we didn't have to go through all of that. So it's not, we're not fighting this uphill battle in all of these other states.
JS236, greetings, Howie and Angela. Question: as president, would you allow an international court to prosecute war crimes, atrocities committed by U.S. troops? Yes, the U.S. should join the international court. There's a thing called universal jurisdiction with respect to crimes against humanity and war crimes. So U.S. troops, and I think more than them, the civilian leadership that has committed crimes by putting them in situations of aggression, which is against international law, they're probably more culpable than the U.S. troops. So, yeah, we should be part of international law, and that's a framework for resolving conflicts in a fair way, and we should support that. Instead, the U.S. wants to bring other countries before the international court, but not their people, and that's a double standard, and it's no moral justification for that.
Magnetic Lizard, what is your position on the U.S. government, both parties, currently orchestrating coups and color revolutions around the world? I mean, one of the things that we've been very consistent when we talk about our foreign policy is that the United States has no business interfering in the way other countries operate and going to other countries and being aggressive, trying to, extract resources or whatever it is they're over there to get. It's not something we support. I mean, it undermines the sovereignty and right to self-determination of those nations. You don't do that. So that's my short, in a nutshell answer. Mr. President, you probably have a, nicer one.
Well, we say we do that in the name of democracy and human rights and international law. But when we do that, we give authoritarian governments an excuse or a rationalization for their nationalism and repression, because we are a threat to them, and therefore they crack down on their own domestic opposition. So we really don't help democracy and freedom and international law by intervening that way. The way we can help is by setting a good example at home. Because right now, what does the world see? Black men being killed by our police, that are basically murders or lynchings. They know that we have the largest prison system in the history of the world. And they hear about voter suppression, particularly of Black people. And so we need to say, and we got whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and publishers like Julian Assange that are being prosecuted by our government. So until we clean up that act, whatever we say about human rights and democracy in other countries has no credibility. And that's the most powerful thing we have, a good example that other people want to emulate. But it's people in those countries got to make their own revolutions if they got an oppressive government. To send in the Marines to do that, I was in the Marines. That's not what we do. We learn how to kill people and blow things up. And maybe in defense of the United States, that might be justified, although it's hard to imagine anybody invading the United States. China's not getting on boats coming over here. Russia's not coming on boats coming over here. The Mexicans, whatever Trump says, are not about to invade. The Canadians aren't coming. So
they definitely aren't coming.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's ridiculous that we think we got to have a military budget that's almost as large as the rest of the world combined, because the only threat we really face is this nuclear arms race, which we triggered by this nuclear modernization program, started under Obama, continues under Trump. Now the Russians and the Chinese are following suit. The balance of terror has been destabilized. Bullets in the atomic scientists has their doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. And we got this vacuous, issueless campaign here in the United States, where the Democrats are saying Trump is, a meanie, and Uncle Joe's a nice guy. And the Republicans are saying Biden's going to mobilize the hordes to come burn down your suburbs. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, the climate is melting. Working class living standards life expectancies are in decline.
The West Coast is on fire.
Stagnant wages and rising healthcare and housing and college costs. And we got this nuclear arms race that hasn't even been discussed by any of the presidential candidates or the political leadership in either party, because both parties support this nuclear modernization program. So, it's a real shame. It's a real problem for the American people that they aren't even having the real issues debated in this election. It's all about, with us, how do we keep them off the ballot? And with the Democrats and Republicans, who can raise the most money, dark money, both parties, Biden said, I got to take dark money so I don't unilaterally disarm. Dark money is money we don't know where it came from. Trump's taking it, Biden's taking it. They put it through 501c4s, which don't have to report their donors. They can spend some of that as a 501c4 on elections, or they can give it to super PACs, which report the money came from the 501c4, not its original source. We don't know where it came from. So we don't know who the hell's buying this election. It's a sham. And, the idea that we can go around the world preaching democracy, we got problems right here at home.
That's a whole lot of hypocrisy right there.
Sure.
Hey, Brenda, in what states are there still battles? And I'm assuming you're referring to battles for us to have ballot access. We just won in Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Where else?
Well, those are the ones where, affecting our ballot status right now is Montana and Pennsylvania. And I'm not up on the briefs on that. What I understand in Pennsylvania is they challenged the paperwork of the woman who stood in for vice president. And when we substituted Angela, the paperwork was not in order. So the court ordered that I be on the ballot, but not Angela in Pennsylvania. And now the Democrats are appealing that, saying that if I don't have a vice presidential candidate, I shouldn't be on the ballot either. And so it's not us causing a problem with absentee mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, because they're coming up against a deadline. It's the Democrats who don't want us on the ballot. So get it out of your mind, because it's the corporate media narrative, but they are stenographers for the major parties, in this case, the Democratic Party, if they're CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post. And they're going to tell you it's us. No, it's the Democrats. So that's where it stands. That issue's pending. And in Montana, I know that, I'm not sure where that is. I think the last decision we're off the ballot, but that's being appealed. But I'm not sure. It might be the other way around. It keeps going back and forth. So I think those are the two where it's still up in the air. And there's other cases in Indiana, Nevada, Arizona, that the process means it will set precedents for the next election cycle. Won't get us on the ballot this time. But we will be write-ins in Arizona and Indiana. If I remember right, you can't be a write-in in Nevada. But I may be wrong, because we're dealing with 52 jurisdictions and I can't keep them all straight. Every state has its own election laws. 52 counts DC and Guam, which has an advisory presidential vote, and we're on the ballot there. So hopefully people there are worried about rising sea levels and will vote green, and we'll get a strong statement out of the people of Guam. Sabrina, any thoughts, strategies to the fact that about 60 to 65% of voters counted in 2016, meaning a potential 40% or more not voting that could win if united? I know those numbers are very rough, but they're very close. It's closer to 60-40. That's 100 million people. Mm-hmm. They are predominantly working class people, disproportionately people of color, and young people. And those are the people that are disgusted by the two major parties. Those are the people that are the future of a green party and independent left in this country. Those are the people that we've got to organize and build. When I say organize, we go out in those communities and listen, build relationships, friendships, and trust. Because right now they don't trust politics. They think it's politricks.
And why should they?
Yeah. So we need to, go out and really do organizing, not just mobilizing the usual suspects, for protests or public hearings or a petition or whatever it is. That is really how we're going to build the Green Party into a major party and force in American politics. And those people are the future. But it's going to take time. Takes time to build relationships and get involved in communities and build organization. So it doesn't stop on November 3rd with the election. That's got to be our strategy going forward.
Will Burton, I saw this in the chat. It's a good question. What would you do to help those like myself who are displaced from their homes due to the wildfires? I'm so sorry, darling.
Well, first of all, we'd have an emergency program to house the homeless. We should have had that already. Get people into structures that are abandoned in a lot of places, into hotels. We got to take care of our people, and that requires, focusing on people's real needs now when they need it. And then in the longer run, we got to rebuild. And we need to pay attention to where we rebuild, whether it's floodplains, which are becoming more flooded as global warming proceeds on the coast and in flood zones because we're getting stronger storms, or in areas that are subject to wildfires. So we gotta figure that in. But we have a program as part of the Green New Deal to build 25 million new units of public housing that will be affordable, that are open to professionals, working class, middle income people, as well as low income people. So it's a program to desegregate the public housing we used to build, just put poor people of color and warehouse them in the worst parts of town in often high rises. We want quality developments that would be an asset in every community in which they're built, and we would build them in all kinds of communities. So we have a housing crisis even before the people displaced by these fires that we've got to address. And we're facing the worst housing crisis in our history because there may be a moratorium on rents, but there's not rent relief coming from the federal government. So when the moratorium ends, people are going to be, a lot of people so far behind on their rents. There have been various estimates, but tens of millions of people may be evicted as we go into winter when the moratorium ends. So this requires an emergency program. In Congress, they're not coming forward. I mean, they went on vacation in August after the supplemental unemployment insurance ran out, after the first moratorium ran out. And, Nancy Pelosi went back to her freezers full of ice cream, and McConnell went back to, I don't know what he goes back to, horse farms in Kentucky. And they neglected the people for a month. And then they came back, and the Senate Republicans passed a bill that they know couldn't pass. So they say we did something. The Democrats did their thing last spring. So it looks like nothing's going to happen till a new Congress is seated next January. I mean, this is a case that we've been saying the two governing parties in this country are presiding over a failed state. They failed on the COVID pandemic. Now they're failing on the economic hardships that people are suffering because of the economic downturn in this pandemic. And now we got wildfires. We got a hurricane hitting Alabama. I know I was talking with somebody in Alabama today, down in Mobile. Does the government have the resources? Are they going to get there on time? Are they going to be like Bush with Katrina? And he's not going to get there for a while, and the aid will be provided without competence. It's big problems, but getting back to the original question, the federal government should step up right now and make sure people now homeless because of the fires have housing. Lucre Denouncer. Sam Knight said on Means Morning Show that he is not a fan of the Green Party because apparently it focuses on electoral politics more than movement politics. What do you say to Sam?
We don't know us, do we?
Who the hell is Means? Sam Knight said it. I don't know who Sam Knight is, but look, I got into politics in the movements. The anti-Vietnam War movement, the civil rights movement in the 60s, the anti-nuclear movement in the 70s, the anti-apartheid movement in the 70s and 80s. Building the Green Party, in my view, as something that would organize between elections as well as during elections. And you can't have a party without movements, because then the party politicians become careerists. You need movements to keep them honest. On the other hand, you can have movements without a party that gives them voice. Look at the war on Iraq. We had what the New York Times called the world's second superpower, the biggest anti-war demonstrations in the history of the world. And the Democrats all lined up with Bush, or most of them, to go to war in Iraq, because actually the peace movement, the biggest coalition at that time, said, well, they said it after the war started, we're going to get behind Kerry as a lesser evil, even though Kerry said he could fight the war better than Bush. And that pretty much dismantled the peace movement. So, yeah, no, we've been involved in Angela Walker here. She got her start in politics. She's too modest, so I'm going to tell a little bit. You can fill in more details. She got involved when she was in high school to get a Black history course in her high school. And then when she was a transit driver for public transit in Milwaukee, got her local union to participate in the Wisconsin uprising, even though her union was exempt from the attack on collective bargaining rights. And because of that work, union president said, "You're now our legislative director." And then she got him involved in Occupy the Hood. That's all in 2011. And then people in Milwaukee said, "We got a crazy sheriff. His name's David Clark. He's a guy who said, don't call 911, get a gun." And Angela knew that the way to fight crime is fight poverty. So she ran as an independent socialist, got 20% of the vote against David Walker, a Democrat, even though he loves Trump. The Democrats know who she is. She's one of the ones that criticized the Democrats for saying, get off the streets, we're going to get rid of Scott Walker by a recall. And then they appointed a conservative Democrat that was hard to distinguish from Walker in that election, and they lost. So Angela's been in the movement for a long time, and I don't know, you could add things, Angela, but
no.
she's model.
I do things. That's all. I do things.
She's a veteran labor and racial justice activist, and electoral politics is the expression of movements in elections. But without the movements, we don't have the base and the power that we need.
ASAP dropout. How are we, and I saw this in the chat too, how are we going to help people get back on their feet who have been, I'm filling it in right there, who have been arrested for nonviolent drug charges? We have an economic bill of rights for that. And one of the pieces of our community control of the police plan is to decriminalize and legalize marijuana and also other drugs, and adopt the model that they use in Portugal, where people who have issues with substance use get a ticket and they come to court, and then they're assigned counselors who go into, the things, issues that they might be having in their lives. And so it's not a criminal offense, it's treated as a medical offense. And one of the things with community control of the police and then legalizing marijuana, decriminalizing it, is also letting folks out of, releasing people who are held on those charges, and also giving them first crack at, no pun intended, but y'all know what I mean, first preference in the legal grow industry. People who have been on the receiving end of the brutality of the drug war in this country should have first place in a thriving legal cannabis industry. And Mr. President can expound on that.
Well, I would just say that, first thing nonviolent drug offenders need to be is released. If it's a issue of addiction, say for a harder drug than marijuana, then they need drug treatment. But our Economic Bill of Rights guarantees a public job if you can't find a private job that pays a living wage. It guarantees an income above poverty through the tax structure, through the tax system. It guarantees affordable housing, Medicare for all, including drug treatment if you need it, access to public education, lifelong, from childcare and pre-K through post-secondary, college, trade schools, continuing adult education. And then if you're an elder and are eligible for Social Security, we want to double Social Security benefits so every senior's above the poverty line, which is particularly a concern now with so many boomers having raised their families in a time when wages were stagnant and housing, healthcare, and college costs went through the roof. So that covers everybody, including nonviolent drug offenders who are released from incarceration. Kristen Kaz-Zuyas.
Hey, Kristen.
There is a big whistleblower news today about forced hysterectomies on detainees in ICE camps in Georgia. What's your thoughts on that, and how can we close these places down? Yeah, well, if that was done without consent, that's the report. That is a crime, and the people that did it should be arrested, and the people that authorized it in ICE as well should face charges. And how can we close these places down? Well, get Donald Trump out of there, and if Biden gets in and we don't, raise hell to close these detention camps down. Immigrants should, what we would do is close the detention camps, help the immigrants and the asylum seekers find housing, employment, education, and other services, and then let them go through the process we have now. Until we get what we want is open borders so people can move freely back and forth across that Mexican border in particular, but the Canadian border as well, for, shopping, jobs, recreation, residence, and freedom of movement is one of the rights in the original UN Declaration of Human Rights, but it was in reference to travel within countries because a lot of countries had internal passports. The apartheid system in South Africa, China had a system, Russia had a system. And the thing today is the economy is global. It's been globalized. Capital moves freely. People, labor should be able to move freely as well. So we can organize across those borders. Right now that border is like an apartheid system was in South Africa. It's a reserve army of labor. When we need more labor, we let more Mexicans and people from Central and South America in. When we don't, we start deporting them. And the low wages on the other side of the border are used as a club against workers on this side of the border. So our companies don't even have to move to Mexico. They can just threaten to do so. And it intimidates workers here from demanding better wages and working conditions. So the borders divide us, and we need to build solidarity across those borders.
And I just want to note, I'm noticing 2 times in the chat, yes, reparations for our people who are descendants of the Ma'afa, the period of African enslavement. Reparations are on our platform. Also, I think it's important for people to be aware that forced hysterectomies are a form of genocide. It's something that has been done to indigenous women. It is being done to, women being held at the border. It is something that Black women know a whole lot about. And so I did not see this story today, and now I'm just that much angrier. So thank you for sharing that. But that is a form of genocide.
The Falcone General. This question for Howie.
Huh? He did it phonetically.
This question is for Howie and Angela, or for Howie and Angela. What are your thoughts about Andrew Cuomo's new rule that will affect the Working Families Party and progressive movement in New York?
That's all you.
My thoughts are, it's the Green Party that Cuomo really has in his sights, because the Working Families Party always endorses him or puts him on their ballot line in the end. So in the end, they don't take votes from him. We do. We got 5% in 2014, in a year when he wanted to run up the vote, get more than his father, Mario Cuomo, got as governor, get more than he got in 2010, and he got substantially less. That's because we're sitting there with 5% of the vote. And he couldn't take us for granted. He had to do some things to compete for our voters. So we got a ban on fracking, a $15 minimum wage, an extension of the millionaire's tax a couple years later, paid family leave, and he even made a gesture toward tuition-free public education. It had Bernie Sanders there to roll it out, but it wasn't that at all. It's called the Excelsior Scholarship, and very small percentage of state university and city university students actually qualify for it. But he had to make the gesture. And look, I have no problem with the working families being on the ballot and, running with the Democrats. They got a big campaign. It was in the New York Times today. They got good old corporate neoliberal Chuck Schumer rooting for him. They're going to have a big campaign telling people, vote for Biden on the working families line. And I don't know. We're both in trouble because of this law Cuomo set up. I know the narrative in the media is Cuomo's mad at Working Families Party, and no doubt they irritate him because he didn't want any kind of progressive, having any say in politics. But we took votes from Cuomo, so I think it's really us in the crosshairs more than anybody. But both of us, we both sued, and they lost in court. Our case is still pending, but I'm not sure we're going to win. So we're going to have to keep the Green Party on the ballot line. About 200,000 votes. And the working family is going to have to get about 200,000 votes for Biden on their line instead of the Democratic line. And both of us face this idiotic thing that you got to vote for Biden to landslide Trump in order to send some kind of message. But look, in New York, Biden's been ahead consistently by 25 percentage points. There's no way Trump is toast in New York. So the question is, how are you going to vote against Biden? And I believe the Green vote is the strongest anti-Trump vote. And it also will keep an independent left on the ballot. Working Families is a left within the Democratic Party coalition. So I think that's something people need to keep in mind. But I hope both the Greens and the Working Family Party meet the threshold. I really do.
Dylan Welch. Hey, Dylan. Do you guys have any plans to adjust or fix public education's infrastructure, like how inner city schools constantly have problems like uneven floors and leaky roofs? Yes, we do.
Yeah, we have a major budget item in the Green New Deal, the eco-socialist Green New Deal budget. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's based on the needs of schools for decent infrastructure, which we haven't revised since the pandemic, which probably means it needs to be increased because they need better ventilation and things like plexiglass dividers, and as well as money for the custodial crew to keep those schools disinfected during the pandemic. So,
and for them to be protected while they're doing it.
Yes. So, we do have a commitment to upgrading our schools, and not just for leaky roofs and furnaces that don't work, big problem in New York City, lead-laced water. And this again, New York City, I know there are a lot of schools where you can't drink the water because of lead. Lead pipes is particularly a problem. We have that problem here in Syracuse. That's all over. So there's a lot of work to be done on the schools, which will employ a lot of people and provide a better environment for our students. Also, we need to upgrade the broadband capacities of schools, particularly in the rural and inner city areas, which haven't had the resources to get up to speed in that area. So there's a lot of investment we need to make in our school infrastructure. Joan Konerman, what top 3 things would you want a new supporter to know?
That's a good question. Well, one thing we want people to know is that this is not a symbolic campaign. We are actually running for reasons. We do, we have a 50-state strategy. It is our intention to win. I think people need to know that. We're not running for window dressing. Now, in the event that that doesn't happen, our run opens ballot lines for all of our down ballot candidates, and there's a whole lot of them running that we are celebrating, lifting up. And I think more than that, this requires a lot of bravery. I think that, for new supporters, you know why you're here. You know what you believe in. And I think one of the most important things about getting the word out about this campaign, because we don't have access to mainstream media in the way that, the parties of the duopoly do, I think that it's important to let other people know why you support us. What parts of this platform resonate the most with you? What do you get excited about? How does it shape the vision that you have for the world that you want to live in? And so I think that, one of the things I would tell a new supporter is, like, bring your imagination and bring it with this platform. Why does this resonate with you? And be able to share that. And Howie, because you probably get into the nuts and bolts, and I do the whole idealism thing. So there's that.
Well, first thing I'd say is we have issues. We have policies, unlike Biden and Trump, that we want to debate. We got a plan to deal with the climate emergency, the eco-socialist Green New Deal. We have a plan to deal with the growing inequality and declining life expectancies of working class people. That's the Economic Bill of Rights. And we have a plan to deal with this existential threat of nuclear war from the new nuclear arms race. And those are peace initiatives, 75% cut in military spending, withdrawal from these endless wars in over 800 foreign military bases, pledge that we won't use nuclear weapons first, disarm to a minimum credible deterrent, and go to the other nuclear powers and say, we want complete and mutual nuclear disarmament because these weapons should never be used. If they're used, it'll be the end of all of us. And go there with world public opinion. 122 nations agreed to the text of the new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons 3 years ago. The rest of the world's scared to death of what's going on. And the international campaign for the abolition of nuclear weapons got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. But most people in this country don't know that, because none of the political leadership in the major parties talks about it, because they both support the nuclear modernization program. None of the presidential candidates have talked about it. Should be a top campaign issue. So the first thing people should know is we got issues and real solutions to these problems. Second thing I would say is that this doesn't stop on November 3rd. This is about building a movement, a political alternative to the two-party corporate state. And, they alternate who governs, but when it comes to economics, it's for the corporations. When it comes to foreign policy, it's for the corporations. When it comes to environmental neglect, it's for the corporations. And they get us all worked up over cultural issues, which are important. And there are differences between the Democrats and Republicans on things like how we talk about race, abortion rights,
yes,
gay rights, and so forth. And those are important issues. But they get everybody worked up over that. Meanwhile, they're both on the same page on economics, foreign policy, and the environment. And so we're going to keep doing it. I guess the last thing I would say is, Martin Luther King had a book, Why We Can't Wait. And it's more true today than ever. Real solutions can't wait. We can't wait for Trump to get out of there and then Biden to screw things up for 4 more years. We got to get as big a vote as we can in this election and then keep fighting.
See? Succinct.
Easy come, easy go. How would you describe eco-socialism? Well, I would say it's a socialism that, unlike 20th century socialisms, which were trying to solve the problem of scarcity and build productive forces, we're plenty productive now. So the question is, how do we produce everyone's basic needs within ecological limits so we can have a sustainable society? And the other thing I'd say about socialism in contrast to the way it's portrayed by the people that run this country, is about economic democracy. It's about extending democracy into the economy. So instead of us being subject to these giant private tyrannies called corporations, we, in the private sector, we'd have cooperatives where we elect the boards. We have a say. And the surplus value we create is distributed to the people that created it in proportion to how much they contributed in labor. So instead of the capitalist stealing your property, you get your full share of the property you created or the value you created. You know, they like to talk about property rights. Well, socialism is about the property rights of workers, and we get the full value of what we're talking about. And then that's distribution according to work. But we also have distribution according to need, things that we think should be available to everybody as a right, like a good job, an income above poverty, a home, healthcare, education, and a secure retirement. That's our economic Bill of Rights. And so those are some of the elements of socialism. The other thing I'll say is, without that economic democracy, we can't have political democracy, because that concentrated economic power translates into concentrated political power. And it's not just them buying politicians and elections and paying for lobbyists. It's financing the government, because the government has to go to the Wall Street elite to get their, in the federal government's case, their treasury securities bought and marketed. And they say no because they don't like what the government's doing. They can control what the government does. So that's the reason for socializing the financial industry. So it's accountable to the people and not a wealthy elite. So Angela's a lifelong socialist too, so she probably has something to add.
Not as like succinctly. I mean, for me, eco-socialism is coupling your fight against capitalist exploitation of human beings, coupling that with the fighting the capitalist exploitation of the planet, her non-human life, and her natural resources. I like this. I'm glad we got this one. I saw it in the chat. I was like, yes. Leah Boggs Jackson is asking us, hey, Leah, what is the Green Party's position on Assata Shakur? Would she be taken off of the FBI list, and your views on political prisoners? Mr. President, I'm pitching it to you for reasons.
Okay, well, yeah, she should be taken off the FBI list. And there are a lot of political prisoners of her era, a lot of them Black Panthers like she was, who are now, frankly, they're elderly. They're no threat to public safety, whatever they might have done or not done. And it's just on humanitarian grounds, they should be released. If they had committed the crimes they were convicted of or accused of, and they weren't political, they'd be out of prison by now. So that's why they're political prisoners. And so these injustices got to stop. We have people that should have been out of prison a long time ago, particularly from that era, my era, that they should be free by now. And that's just on simple humanitarian grounds. And so, you know, and Assata Shakur is somebody who provides inspiration to a lot of people, because she, you know, really fought the system. And what she was accused of doing on that New Jersey Turnpike, you know, we hear the police story. She got a different story. And, you know, I'm inclined to believe her. So what do you got to say, Angela?
Assata Shakur is a Cuban national treasure. The fact that former President Obama as the first Black president, put a price on her head was enough to make me, yeah, y'all already know. So, you know, and being that I describe myself as a Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur socialist, y'all already know how I feel about Assata. Hands off Assata, now and forever. And so, you know, and Howie has written on that. If you go to our website, you will see that Howie has policy papers on freeing political prisoners and whistleblowers.
Tiffany McNeely 11, what do you think about the peace treaty that was signed today? I'm not aware of the peace treaty signed today. So, do you know what that's about, Angela?
No, I've had my head on dealing with Wisconsin and driving a truck all day, y'all. So I ain't even gonna front.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to catch up on the news, such snatches. So, I'm curious now. Who signed the peace treaty?
I'd like to know about that too. I thought that was cute. Hey, Black Burner Coalition. Howie, I heard you don't partake of cannabis yet support legalization. Thank you for understanding the distinction.
You're welcome. I don't know what else to say.
I would if I could, y'all. I would if I could. We could drop the work. Hey, Dust. Oh, I'll read it since I say hey to him. Please talk about the power of public banking to invest in our communities. This is a strong part of the platform, Mr. President.
Yeah, we need public banking at every level, local, state, and national. We have a good example in North Dakota. It's been around 100 years. It's called the Bank of North Dakota. It's really the state of North Dakota, DBA, doing business as the Bank of North Dakota. And they partner with community banks, of which there are more in North Dakota than anywhere else in the country, where you have local ownership, where you have, people that examine whether you should get credit, who actually know you and can make better credit judgments than these big banks on Wall Street, where you hire some young person who puts a template on your financials and decides yes or no on that without knowing your character, whether you work hard or not, and that kind of thing. What kind of networks in the community and family you have. So in North Dakota, they partner with community banks to finance farms, businesses, homes, student loans, consumer loans. And every year they turn net income back to the state. So it actually reduces taxes. And North Dakota is a Republican state, but those Republicans love their socialist bank. They wouldn't change it. It's been around 100 years. We need similar things at the local level and at the federal level. I started at the federal level. We got, I forget the number, it's 5 or 6 giant banks that have a majority of the assets, the deposits, the depositors, and the revenues and profits of the whole banking sector. They have a systemic impact. They are too big to fail. They're so powerful, they're too big to jail, depending on who we got as Attorney General. This one wouldn't jail him, but Eric Holder wouldn't either. So we need to bring them under public control. And they can help finance the Green New Deal projects and do it at cost rather than for a cost plus a profit. Because in the end, their purpose is to finance businesses, not make money off of credit. Another example is innovation. A public bank has a longer time horizon than these venture capitalists. If you got an idea you want to bring to market, the venture capitalists want to make money off you in 3 to 5 years. And if it looks like it's a longer term project, you're out of luck. And then let's go to the local level. Same thing with commercial banks at the local level. Small businesses don't get bank loans for the most part. That's not what banks do. They want to rip us off with payday loans and check cashing and all these fees they charge, because that's how they make their profits. We need local banks that can provide credit to small businesses, as well as home mortgages and consumer loans and that kind of activity. And in the case of right now, the marijuana industry, given the federal government hasn't legalized marijuana, and we've had attorney generals like Jeff Sessions who threatened to prosecute people in that business because it's against federal law still, even though it's legal in a lot of states. It became an all cash business. which creates a lot of problems. The banks wouldn't touch it. So you set up a public bank to do that within the legal framework of states that have legalized marijuana. That's why they're doing it in California, or moving that way. I know, I can't remember the details, but I think Los Angeles had a referendum for that. So that's another area. And then finally, the postal system should go back to postal banking. That was my first bank. I used to collect my little money every time I had $5, which took a while, you know, doing a paper route and mowing lawns and that kind of thing. I would get a little certificate of deposit. And that was my bank, you know, and the postal clerks, you know, were very friendly and very clear. There are no fees and all this other nonsense. And then President Johnson shut it down, and it had to be all shut down in, I think it was 67. And besides dragging on civil rights and going to war in Vietnam, that was a radicalizing experience for me. Why did they do that? Well, you know, I later figured out it's because the commercial banks didn't want the competition. Well, too bad. We need postal banking, particularly for the unbanked, who are victims of these predatory banking practices like cash checking services and payday loans. And so people can put their savings and, you know, get money orders and, you know, get some interest on their savings and that kind of thing, which they can't do now because to get in a commercial bank, you have to put a minimum amount of money in, and, you know, they chip away at your savings with all their fees that pretty soon you got no money anyway. So, you know, low-income people need public banks. So there's a lot of things to say for it. But the last thing I'll say is, you know, when we talk about a Green New Deal, we're talking about an eco-socialist Green New Deal with big public sectors in energy, transportation, and manufacturing. So we can, and it's public enterprise and planning, so we can coordinate and carry through a rapid transition to zero to negative greenhouse gas emissions and 100% clean energy by 2030. We need to finance that. And not all of it will come from transferring money from the military budget and taxing the rich. We got to invest so much so quickly, we're going to have to borrow. And what better way for the government to extend those loans and then get the payback as the revenues come in from the public enterprises we're setting up, public housing, public transportation, public broadband, and so forth. So, and public energy. So, you know, public banking is part of having a way of actually carrying out public plans for economic development, sustainable, ecologically sustainable economics.
Jacob Krug, or Krug, please correct me if I'm wrong. The peace treaty signed today was between Israel and United Arab Emirates. I do not know the details myself, so appreciate that.
I thought they'd already signed it. It was announced before. And the thing that concerns me is that, you know, both sides have disregarded the Palestinians and their rights. And so this seems to me to be Israel building up allies with the conservative Arab governments, these monarchies, and basically getting more legitimacy for their stealing of Palestinian land and disregarding and repressing Palestinian rights. And so I'm not sure it's a plan for peace. It's an alliance that Israel and the UAE have made. And in the long run, it may not contribute to peace. That's my fear. Tank Vanderpool, would you have ran for president if Bernie won the Democratic nomination? Yes, I would. Bernie program was basically New Deal liberalism, tax the rich to fund social programs. And like I was talking about before, that leaves the rich with their concentrated economic power, which translates into concentrated political power that can resist and roll back the social programs. So we really want a democratic socialism. The other thing is Bernie, on foreign and military policy, had no program to really transform how we conduct ourselves in the world. You know, he's not as much as a hawk as Biden and Trump, but on the other hand, he wasn't ready to take on the military industrial complex. And if you get elected president without a popular mandate to do that, you're not going to be able to do that. As soon as you do that, you better have the people with you because the military industrial complex has power outside of elections as well. So there are enough differences. And plus, the Green Party needs ballot lines. Bernie Sanders is just one guy. And as he himself pointed out, it's we, not me. We need a movement. And you go into the Democratic Party, you're going to change it, it changes you, including Bernie Sanders. Now that he's supporting Biden, he's compromised on his signature issue, Medicare for all. He now says he'll accept Medicare for all 55 and older. That leaves in place hundreds of insurance companies. And that means healthcare providers got to look through and see what your plan is, what's covered, what's not covered, who to bill. Then they got to fight the insurance companies for payment. That's that overhead that costs about 1/3 of our healthcare dollar. So all you're doing by going to Medicare 55 and up is getting some more people covered, which is good. But that's not what the whole point of a single public payer system was. It was to make it efficient so we could cover everybody with first helm of the ship of state. So that's understandable. We understand that. But they're spending a lot of time attacking us when what has caused Republicans to get elected? Losers like Bush and Trump, who lost the popular vote in 2016. It was black voter suppression. Tens of thousands of votes in Florida in 2000. Either people were purged from the rolls, black people, or their votes weren't counted because of hanging chads in certain counties that were disproportionately black. Tens of thousands of votes, and they want to blame Ralph Nader. And the Democrats didn't fight to get the whole state recounted. The media went back and counted those ballots, found out Gore won. So they can't blame us for that. And same thing in 2016. There are 75,000 ballots in Detroit that were never counted because the Republican Secretary of State sent in defective scanners to those Detroit precincts. So people, ballots were put in the scanners, it wasn't working, so they were set aside. And then post-election, the Greens sued to have them counted. And the Republicans argued, but there's a discrepancy between the number of votes counted or scanned and the number of ballots in the precinct. So if something fishy's going on, don't count them. Of course, we're saying that's exactly why you should count them. They were never counted. And the Democrats, Clinton had her lawyers in that courtroom. And the judge, even though they weren't party to the case, said, well, what do you say? Because they said Jill Stein didn't have standing because she couldn't win the election anyway if they were recounted. But Clinton might have could. And her lawyers said, oh, no, we're just here to observe. And then they turn around and blame the Green Party. And I didn't even get to the Electoral College. Trump is a loser. He lost the popular vote. Bush was a loser. He lost the popular vote. So we're calling for getting rid of the Electoral College and having a ranked choice national popular vote for president. And you would think the Democrats would focus on the real problem, which is the Electoral College and Republican suppression of the black vote, which is disproportionately Democratic voters. And instead, they're fighting to get us off the ballot, which actually most of our voters wouldn't vote if we weren't on the ballot. We know from 2016, 61% of Jill Stein's voters, according to exit polls, would have stayed home. We bring new voters to the polls. So when the Democrats do party suppression, they're doing voter suppression too. So I don't know what the conclusion of that. I guess the last thing I'll say is, that COVID crisis is out there, the virus. The epidemiologists are saying we're going to double the deaths by election day. So all the deaths we've had the last, 6 months, 7 months, they expect it to double in the next 2 months. So keep your masks on, wash your hands, keep your distancing, because this is no joke. And we don't have a government right now that knows how to handle it or is handling it. So, Angela, why don't you wrap it up for us?
No, I think that's really good. And I think people, as much as you possibly can, because this is a really dark timeline. This is a really heavy timeline. What Howie said, we are getting, the poo is flying and, we're dodging it, but it's exhausting. And so, For folks who are being vote shamed, just turn it back on them. It's like, look, you want people. We told the Democrats years ago, if you want people, we'll give you advice for free. If you want people to show up, give them someone worth showing up for. Give them policies worth showing up for. For us, this is a no-brainer. You have to earn people's votes. And they chose not to do that, so they want to chastise folks, for not showing up, but you're not giving people anything to show up for. So just when people are coming at you sideways, and they will, and it's only unfortunately going to intensify the closer we get to November 3rd, turn it back around on them. And I just like to remind people, it's like, if you are so hot to get people, get your candidate elected, then get to phone banking. Go round up them 100 million people who did not vote in 2016 and go talk to them. We over here, we're good. We're good. We know what we're doing. We're okay. So just kind of stand on that, and make sure that you are taking the best care of yourselves that you are able, mentally, physically, emotionally. And yeah, that part.